Hello there, podcast lovers. Today's episode features Greg Carlson and Tucker Lucas reminiscing about Trollwood News at Noon. I was only in it for 1 year, so I had very little to this podcast, but these guys are incredibly knowledgeable. Tucker and I also take a trip down memory lane to remember a time when our friendship was tested over the green card marriage that didn't take place. All this and more on this episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is! He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
I was at the convenience store today, and there was an argument taking place between the three people who were working, none of which were helping me. But there was a guy, and then there was an older woman and a younger woman. And the argument they were having was, well, I like to hug, but I don't like to cuddle. And the guy was saying that his girlfriend loves to cuddle, but he doesn't like that. He only wants to hug. And the girl said, I'm the opposite. I like to cuddle, but I don't like to hug. Until finally, this older employee finally says, hugging and cuddling are the same thing. And they broke down the reasons why hugging and cuddling are not the same. For example, with cuddling, there's a caress that can take place with it. So you're kind of moving it around, right? A hug at most only encompasses touching of the lower back. Yeah. Like it's lower back up to the shoulder, the shoulder bone. Versus cuddling can be up and down the arm. You don't see this, but I'm kind of giving examples to Tucker here.
JJ is cuddling himself right now.
I am. And
Jill's out of town, so he's been doing this a lot.
She is. While the cat's away, the mice will cuddle themselves. But it really made me think about how I have never put that much thought into the difference between hugging and cuddling.
I would feel very comfortable asserting that the employee who says, I don't like hugging, but I do like cuddling, I bet that person likes to hug people who they also like to cuddle with, right? But hugging, you can get someone can offer you a hug that you barely know.
Some business meetings end with hugs.
Or like an old friend that you're friends with, but you wouldn't cuddle with them, but they might feel okay to hug you. That just means that you don't have a degree of familiarity with them that you like. But if it was like her boyfriend or her girlfriend and they showed up and they just hugged her, I bet she'd be totally cool with that because that's someone she's comfortable with. So I doubt she's anti-hug.
Right. I feel it's very hard to be anti-hug. But do you think hugging might be a gateway drug to cuddling?
Well, I think a cuddle more than likely would start with a hug if you are greeting each other, right? Okay. A hug is for the most part, it's for greetings or for goodbyes or to console someone. Okay. But I think if you're going to cuddle with someone, say your fiance is in town, JJ, you guys you've been around each other for a couple hours that day, and you're like, let's hug first before we sit down. I just don't think that's going to happen. You're probably going to go directly into cuddling.
Straight into the cuddling?
How often do you think you and your girlfriend hug? You're probably given a smooch goodbye or hello, but probably not a hug.
I think that we embrace a lot, but I think it's been a long time since I've hugged Jill.
Yeah.
I think when you get into a long-term relationship, hugging kind of goes by the wayside. You embrace, you cuddle. There are moments like kissing and, maybe you do that side hug at best with like, okay, I'm gone. Okay, bye.
Christian side hug.
Yeah. But I can't remember the last time I actually hugged Jill.
I mean, when you were a kid, it was like hugs are for your grandparents and your aunts and uncles when you see them.
Yeah, even family friends.
But that was about it. It was
I guess I hugged people at school, like, because I had a girlfriend in first grade. It was kind of a big deal.
You guys were hugging?
We were hugging. And then we had a smooch during a film strip.
Oh, you got your first smooch all the way in first grade, huh?
Yeah.
I didn't get my first smooch until my freshman year.
Of high school?
Yeah. Junior high, technically. So it would have been ninth grade, that was still at, I think that was when it happened. I want to say I was a late bloomer when it came to that.
It's all right.
No, it isn't.
You know what? It is actually. I fully believe
that's true. You could have gotten an STD when you were in first grade.
I was flirting with cooties. Cooties are a weird thing. Why did cooties become a thing? Why did people? Because even before you understand the difference between a viral infection and a bacterial infection, kids have created this disease that you transmit by physical contact.
Largely, it's phonetical, I think, entirely. It's the fact that you're saying cootie instead of like, oh, she's got head lice.
Because that's not...
It just doesn't roll off the tongue the same way that cooties do.
Cooties?
Ew, cooties.
When you were younger, did you ever have a girlfriend before you were like before you knew what boyfriend girlfriend was? Like, I had an uncle who every time I'd see him be like, "Hey, you got a girlfriend? I bet you got a lot of girlfriends."
I mean, I don't think no. Okay, yes, I did. I think I was 4. And I grew up, before I moved to Fargo in '89, we lived in Grandin, North Dakota, which is just half an hour outside of Fargo.
Grandin, where my grandparents are from.
That's right. And there was a kid my age down the block named Stacy, and her and I would play all the time. And one time I asked my babysitter to marry us. So we had a marriage ceremony, and we were married after that. And I guess I should have gotten that annulled. I never thought about it, but I don't think I'm in any legal jeopardy now because I was 4.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Did you sign paperwork? I mean, it was null and void because you were a minor.
You know, I don't even think we had a witness. I just think we had the babysitter who was essentially acting as a justice of the peace. And I don't even think she had the credentials to do that. My guess is my first marriage was a sham.
Some kind of a tax, like a tax barrier.
Or she was trying to get a green card or something.
So, interesting story about...
Gesundheit.
Excuse me. About green cards. The summer I started dating Jill, I almost got married.
I remember this. I remember this causing kind of a friend rift, too, because I got kind of pissed at you.
Yeah, it was a big deal. So, there was... our friend Natalie Deutsch, who at some point will be a guest on here.
Yeah.
We've talked about her several times. Natty Bumpo, the true American hero. So Natalie is working at Camp Thunderbird in the northern plains or I guess the forested northern area of Minnesota. And she's a camp counselor, but there's also like 5 or 6 British camp counselors. And there's a girl there who wants to stay in America, but just she can't get, maybe she hadn't been denied a visa. I don't know what it was. I mean, she was working at a summer camp, so once the job is over, she probably had to leave. And so Natalie called and she was like, yeah, this girl wants to stay. And I'm like, well, maybe she and I should just get married. And Natalie said, that's a great idea. And so we went as far as meeting each other.
Yeah.
But I was just starting to date Jill at that time. We're talking like by weeks this happened. And so I think this girl really would have gone through with it.
She was dead set on it. Absolutely. And I remember the discussions that were going on. And then I want to say the plan was, if I remember this correctly, was that a bunch of us were going to go on a road trip together for you guys to get married. And then the morning of, we were all waiting at your house. And then you called in, you're like, yeah, I'm not going. And
it's not happening.
You and Jill had just gone somewhere to be alone. And we had all like made plans. Like I had packed a suitcase and I was at your house and we were trying to get a hold of you and you just weren't hearing it. And that was hilarious though. I wonder, she must have just gotten deported back.
Yeah, I think she did. And she wanted to be a cop.
That
was her dream, was to be an American police officer.
Weird.
I wonder whatever happened to her. And like somebody, like I think there's years later, Natalie was telling me that she was like, her family had a castle. And it was like they didn't want her to be an American, but they were like, fine, what's the dowry?
Yeah.
I was like, dowry? You're going to give me money to marry your daughter? I think I made the right choice. I only had 2 people who tried to talk me out of it. One, of course, was Jill. The other was my friend who maybe has the worst ideas ever, Phil Lund. So it's weird that none of the other level-headed, the people I trust for counsel, attempted to say, no, you shouldn't do this. But you guys are all right anyway.
Yeah. And I bet Natalie can maybe bridge the gap there. Find out if she's kept in touch with this British woman or not, if she ever achieved her dream of becoming a British American policewoman.
Sounds like a good documentary to me.
It would.
Yeah. It also sounds like the plot of one of the news stories you might see on Trollwood News at Noon.
Yes, absolutely. That would have been a great concept for one.
Especially with like the Bloody Bride out there.
We had some British people on there from time to time.
This podcast delves deep into Trollwood Performing Arts School's video production classes. You get a little bit about the history. You get some of the favorite sketches and scenes as told by my producer, Tucker Lucas. And then our guest today, Greg Carlson. Greg ran that operation for 14 years. A lot of kids went through there. And what's neat about Greg is Greg always treated you like you were, it felt like a college class, right?
Yeah.
And the way a college professor treats students.
Yep.
Not as inferiors, and it's not like he's just babysitting us. He treated us in the way that you'd want to be treated when you're trying to create something and you're kind of going out onto a limb.
Yeah. If anything, I hope this podcast does is instill a fear of jealousy in those who listen who were unable to take his classes at Trollwood, because those are some of the best memories of my life. I loved those summers. I took those classes for 5 years. I was only supposed to be able to take them for 2, but they didn't kick me out of the class. I just kept signing up for it again.
You just didn't get high school credit over and over, right?
I did get high school credit over.
What?
I think I did. I think I did. I believe. I really can't remember. But
here's what people don't realize is Trollwood, since it was affiliated, it was a program of the Fargo Public Schools. I got high school credit for those classes. I think you got a quarter of a credit for each class you took.
I want to say a quarter of a credit for each class you took, and the video production classes were 2 classrooms long.
So you got a half a credit.
You got a half a credit for each one. So I want to say I did get credit every year for taking the class again.
Good.
I believe I did.
I should have just taken baking over and over and over again and just aced that bad boy.
This is also a podcast. I'm interested to hear from people who are part of the new Trollwood generation, because Trollwood has since relocated from Trollwood Park in North Fargo to the Blue Stem Amphitheater area in South Moorhead. It's still called Trollwood, right?
It's still called the Trollwood Performing Arts School, but it's not in Trollwood Park anymore.
Yeah, and I think, I obviously the kids who are there now, they're making new memories that they will look back fondly on their time. We look back fondly on our time at the old Trollwood, and we do get into a bit of that as well.
But kind of what nostalgia means to you.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I also want to hear from some of the old Trollwood alums who were in this, and let me know if we missed a sketch that you really like. Full disclosure, after this podcast was done, we went out to lunch, and there was some serious shop talk about trying to get digital versions of these available. Maybe not on YouTube, but somewhere where we would let everyone know where they are, but the general public couldn't necessarily seek them out, just so that if you want it to be a little more private, it can be a little more private.
I wouldn't be surprised, though, if some of these skits make their way to our JJ Meets World Facebook page.
Oh, I love that tease. Keep checking back. Throw it a like. Tell your friends to like it.
And hey, if you like today's podcast, maybe you'd want to donate to our Patreon account.
We're going to do this before it starts, too.
We're gonna pepper Patreon throughout as much as we can.
Thank you very much to the people who, in fact, let's figure this out. Well, there's no way that we could hold that Trollwood News and Noon stuff ransom, is there?
No,
because I suppose it's not our intellectual property.
No.
But you don't own the music rights to it either, former students. So we're all going underneath the veil of sorry, copyright holders.
Yeah, but seriously, we could use your help. Patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld, and that would help us continue to not just provide you these podcasts, but continue to tease you about potential content that will go on our Facebook page.
For example, it's going to take some money to purchase the equipment needed to transfer some of these archaic styles of media.
Yeah.
And so this money, that's what it can go towards. We're not going to start a GoFundMe page because we're a legit media entity. Mm-hmm. That's why we use Patreon.
Yep. We're working on the empire part of it, the media empire, but for right now we're this.
It's on its way. So sit back, relax. This episode of JJ Meets World is a Trollwood News at Noon and 3,600 seconds retrospective with Greg Carlson.
JJ Meets World.
So, Greg, what are some murderers you identify with?
Murderers
I'm just kidding. We're not going to start with that.
Okay.
I was really interested to find out what Greg was going to say.
My first answer. I don't know.
Vlad the Impaler.
No, probably. Well, I would like to identify with Vlad the Impaler, but I'm more likely to identify with Norman Bates. I would say. Yeah.
More of a Vigo man over here.
Oh, sure. That's good.
Okay, so Greg, the first time I had interaction with you was out at Trollwood, and it's classic Trollwood.
Right.
So that's what I like to say.
North Fargo Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The place that actually is still called Trollwood.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, they asked
true
me
Trollwood.
to MC the alumni show,
right.
and I did, and I said, okay, listen. So I never took any classes out here, and I was never in the main stage. So I don't know why you're asking me to do this, but let's have some fun. And so I told them, I was like, there's something missing in this space that I just don't understand. I liked being in a hog barn.
I grew up basically with the North Fargo Trollwood. I actually lived there for 2-3 days when I was a kid because my dad taught there. And my mom, even from time to time, had taught their dance back in the day. And I must have been 6 years old, I think. My sister would have been 4. And our house, the floors were getting redone, and we needed a place to stay. And so my dad got it hooked up that we would stay in the teacher's lounge in that red barn,
upstairs.
the upstairs. And we lived there for like 2 or 3 days. And I thought it was so cool that I lived at Trollwood Park, that I had a park as my backyard. It was pretty sweet. I mean, so I grew up going to Trollwood every summer, hanging out with my dad, either taught classes like stage combat or anything else, or part of the plays. I knew all like the people who were around there. I grew up with them, Vicky Choupoulos and John Marks. So to me, it's really hard for me to go to Blue Stem and say that this is Trollwood, because Trollwood is very intrinsically a certain place and time for me.
For you, right?
Yeah.
And so the kids who've never been to the old park, Blue Stem it's those same memories. That's what they associate with Trollwood. And there just happen to be some people who kind of have a little bit of an overlap, and those are the people who are going to really have some problems later on psychologically, going back and forth. But I met you through the video production class out at Trollwood.
June session.
Yeah.
June session classes, yeah.
How many years did you work with that?
I did 14 years. I wanted to make it to 15, but it just I didn't quite get to that 15th anniversary. So 14 years, and I started in 1997, I think, was the first year that I taught at Trollwood.
Yeah,
and
that would be right.
That was the first I was approached. I don't know how, I didn't go seeking it. It wasn't like a job posting or anything of that nature. My name had been forwarded by someone, and so I got a call. I got contacted and asked if I had any interest. So I met with John and Vicky, and I met with Sharon Round, I think was I don't know if you remember her. She was a playwright and performer, and she was the head, what was your dad's position called? He did it for
Registrar?
a number of years. Like the registrar. Well, Amber Walmsley was the registrar when we were.
She's the person who actually has a teaching degree, so they're allowed to.
I can't remember. It was the same position that Carrie Winterstein had at one point.
Yeah,
but I'm not recalling the name of
So I met with them, and they said, could you teach a video production class? And I thought, well, what do you have? What kind of equipment do you have? And they had whatever was at Ben Franklin, like a couple of VCRs and an old SVHS camcorder. I think that was it. And I was at MCAT at the time, so I asked Dana if it would be okay, Dana Harris, if it would be okay if we use their gear and their space. And I said, I'll do it if you can give me a van, because we need to be mobile. I have to be able to get into a place where the students can actually edit and have their hands on equipment. And they agreed. And that was, I know that video production was an expensive class to run at Trollwood because I always needed an assistant, and we had tried to limit the enrollment because I wanted everyone to be able to actually do some shooting, do some writing, do some editing, do some producing. And that's how it kind of came to be. But the first year there were 4 students in the class. I didn't know if they were even going to let it go with 4, but they did, because John thought he believed in some kind of future. So it was Luke Italiano, Emily Seelig, Danny Gillespie, and Sean Thorson.
Okay.
That was the first.
Boy.
I remember all
the Fantastic Four.
The original 4. Yeah. and so they established the format that we kept for 14 years.
Which was?
Like sort of loosely based on Saturday Night Live, like a sketch comedy, like a phony news show, where everyone had to create a character name, at least one. And that was really like the secret ingredient, because for kids who came in only wanting to do tech and they didn't want to perform, it was my idea that everyone was going to try everything, even if you excelled, even if someone wanted to only be on camera. And I thought by having them do the made up name, even if they were a reluctant performer, they could at least like get outside themselves and sort of imagine, be a different person on screen for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I was, as a kid, mega obsessed with SCTV and consumed everything SCTV that I could. And that's what video production reminded me of, was this thing where you're creating the show and there's shows within shows. And sometimes you have characters who interact with each other. And so you've got to figure out, like, how do I play both of these parts together?
That's right.
It was creating a small universe, a Trollwood news at Nooniverse.
Yeah, and for those 14 years, for those various groups of people, it was like you had a production Bible. It was like we carried over from year to year what certain geographies were that existed within Trollwood Park, and maps would be made and so on.
And there was always a Russian weatherman, which was started by Luke Taliano. He was Dmitry Romanov.
I think. Yeah.
And then what was Alex Davies?
Shoot, I'm blanking on it. Nikolai Alexandrovich.
Yeah, Nikolai Alexandrovich,
and he showed up with his own coat, right?
He had attained some former Soviet paraphernalia, like an officer's cap and a coat, and so he did a lot of. Alex was one of the great performers. He did so many characters. Master Crewley was his sort of evil schoolmaster.
So I took this class, which is why I'm repeating a lot of the words that Greg is saying right after he says them. That's also how I met Greg, was in this video production class, and I met him in 1999. So it was the third year you were doing it.
Okay,
and immediately, I remember day one of that class going, yes, this is going to be awesome. And the year that I started was the summer that Phantom Menace came out.
Yep.
And I remember distinctly on day one, me and Tim Larson and Seth Harju and Tanner Dolan, and I forget who else, Dan McGuire, Luke, and Carly.
Oh, yes.
I think a few other people, maybe Kevin McLean, sitting around talking about how awesome we thought Phantom Menace was, and Greg is just swallowing it.
I was just flop sweat, because I didn't want to ruin these poor. These were just, to me, they were young kids who deserved to enjoy things on their own terms. And I had come out of Phantom Menace, of course, just a broken man, like a sobbing mess, thinking like my life I've been living a lie for all these years. And so I had to be like, it's really cool.
But that you had to swallow your tongue many times.
Yes. But that summer was so fun. I did it 4 more summers. I did 5 classes in a row.
You did the maximum that you could participate in, right?
Yeah. Well, so the first year I was there was the last year there was only 1 video production class.
Oh, yeah.
The year after that, it was so popular, and so many of us wanted to come back, that they created a video production 2 class,
right? Because these were 2-period classes, so it was ended up, because you got a double shot rather than just a one.
And
class.
I took both then.
Yep.
The
so you're
first
doing like
year,
four
and then
periods.
I was asked not to do that anymore, just because I was hogging up enrollment space. But I was like, this is the
Who
most.
asked you?
Vicky Chapoulis.
Vicky was like,
because
we need you.
Is it possible
step back,
if you didn't take at least one of these classes? And I was like, okay.
Sure.
So I stayed in 2, and then I was in 2 for the rest of the time.
And they kind of made that the precedent.
Yeah.
Like you probably created the rule change.
They did not. I certainly was not someone that they were going to disengage. Right? They're like, he's super interested in this.
Yeah.
Let's let him keep doing it, because that's good. He's getting an outlet for it. And then other kids did the same thing.
So it's really great that his dad has a teaching license and he's out here. So we don't want to disrupt that apple cart.
I could always knock things over if I needed to.
Yeah,
that's true.
I found it amazing that John Marks's interest in students at risk and special needs students and funneling them our way towards the video production class meant that you had this crazy mashup of these extremely gifted, like just super smart, creative, talented people, and then kids who came in thinking, I don't want to be here. Like I would rather be anywhere else but here. And then finding a way to sort of make it all work together. That was the biggest like day-to-day challenge I had with the class, because you would have, a Toby Jones. How do you stop Toby Jones? But then you're also like working with, I shouldn't name names on the pod.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Napoleon Dynamite, right?
We have nicknames, so we can certainly do that.
And I loved all those. I loved working with all. And looking back too, I was glad for it.
Is it cliche to say that most of those kids by the end of June had turned around and enjoyed their time in video production? I think so.
I mean, a lot of them came back, and there were a number of repeats, and I appreciated that. Like it didn't. The way I interacted with students at Trollwood is sort of how I interact with practically anybody of any age, which is just to, treat them the same, just with a kind of a sense of equilibrium, like meet them where they are, I guess, is one cliche way to put it. But, they give what they were capable of giving to the production. So yeah, there would certainly be stars that would rise up and have like more dominant role on the show, and other people you'd have to be like, oh please, like just bring them along, like coax them along a little bit.
There are people in my life that I'll run into at an event, and my only interaction with them really is news at noon in some way. And so that's what we'll talk about every time we see each other every couple of years. For example, Mindy Lund and I once a year talk about that worm costume that she wore.
So great.
What was the character's name? But she was
Glowworm.
sort of...
Wasn't it like
was it just
Glowworm?
Mindy Glowworm or something like that? She was sort of apathetic.
Yeah.
And she did a report from the vending machine. So I think she would do like
she was great.
Location reports from
I
weird locations.
I loved Mindy's contributions. I mean, a lot of the people who were self-conscious about their abilities thought that they weren't giving anything special, but that like made it fantastic to me. I remember there was a foreign exchange student. There was one from oh my gosh, do you remember?
I think that might have been your second year.
My second year, yeah, and we were trying to do a Treasure Island sketch. And so there's a character in Treasure Island named Blind Pew, right? And so the gag was that the character's name was Blind Bench, because a pew is like a bench. And trying to translate that to someone who came from Tibet, I think she was from, or I'm not sure where, on the other side of the world, was a long shot. But it was so much fun for me to be able to try to...
There's some pretty classic skits from that show too, especially from the first season. I remember. So we take this class, and Greg goes, "Here's some examples from the previous 2 seasons."
Right. We always start by watching the previous
one. And he showed us from season 1 the Trollwood News at Noon soap opera. What was it called?
Trollwood Beach.
Trollwood Beach, and that was pretty awesome. You've got these kids, acting like they're soap stars, and every segment ends with like a slap to the face. I believe.
Yeah, that was the gag. Is that it was simply a series of one-liners. So very Muppet Show. You would just have someone say like, "I don't care what my wife says, what my psychiatrist says. You keep your hands off my wife." And then it would then a slap to the face with a really great sound effect edited in. So it was just even though we knew it was kind of anti-humor a little bit at the time for kids to be making, and it was sophisticated in that sense, because we would slip things through, because we were showing each episode to the whole school at lunchtime on Fridays.
This was a different era of media savviness too, because there was not YouTube,
pre-YouTube.
The internet was very basic, and
Angel Fire.
There wasn't, basically the shared collective language that anyone had would be from what they saw on TV. And so people just wouldn't grab things, or adults would kind of ignore it more because it wasn't as pervasive. So yeah, you could sneak things in, like referring to Mr. Clean's genitals.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of double entendre kind of stuff. I mean, we never wanted to do anything that would be potentially perceived as a red flag to teachers or students. I mean, it was edgy, but never like so inappropriate that it would that someone would. I mean, I would be happy to play any episode today.
Yeah,
and I think they still hold up in their world, in their own way.
One thing so for listeners who have never been to Trollwood or know what we're talking about, it is it's a theater day camp that takes place during the month of June. And so the amount of inside jokes. Mm-hmm. So you could not show Trollwood News at Noon to somebody who has no frame of reference, and they would be able to get everything. Mm-hmm. They would be able to glean some funny stuff like part of parodies. But when you make a Joe Dodd joke, they're sort of like, I don't see what's happening. And that is one of the things I like the most about it, because you end up with this shared experience and a great inside joke when you're playing it, and you're playing it on a rollout television and VCR combo.
Yeah, classic AV Club stuff.
Yep.
When you wheel it out on the cart,
That was always fun, though. We would always look forward to the end of the week on Friday, because that meant the episode was ready.
Yep.
And then at lunchtime, Video Production 1, which would happen in the morning, would get to show their video then. And I think Video Production 2, we found some way of making it work.
We figured out a way once the second class was up and running. But it was still about once a week that you would get to show something. And it made you feel good, like you'd completed. That's what I liked, is that because we worked on the deadline, good or bad, the show, sink or swim, the show is on. It's gonna be done.
Yeah.
And then people could be like, yeah, I made that. And so you feel like for just that brief moment, the life of a mayfly moment, you feel like, a rock star.
I think another thing too, if you try to do that class now, all the kids in the class have been making movies on their phones, and they've been seeing, people doing things in HD, and they're used to more access to video production and a higher level of quality just in general.
Sure.
Which I wouldn't be surprised if that would limit them. They wouldn't feel like they could play as much because they were trying to aim for...
It's a good point. I wonder.
For a very specific look. Like, we knew that, hey, we're doing this with, on VHS tape, with cameras, and we all like it, and we know that it's just made by us for our friends and for ourselves. And so we just felt like we could play.
You were there during the transition from tape to tape editing to digital nonlinear editing.
99 was my first year, and that was the last year that you only did tape to tape, which was really interesting to learn on. The next year, you still did tape to tape for video 1, but then in video 2, you guys got an iMac for the first time at MCAT.
That was
John, Ruby iMac.
Well, the Ruby iMac at MCAT, and then John Marks also got a grant for one of his after-school programs and got an early Mac. I mean, this was like, it was a special edition, so it had 12 gig. It had not 10, because the standard was 10, but it came with a bonus 2 gigabytes of storage space. So we had a whopping 12 gig to work with. It's amazing.
And I also think a different aspect of today is they don't leave the Blue Stem campus. And there was something magical about driving to, when I was there, we went to
MSU.
Morehead State.
We were over there. Yep.
And that was fun because you were in a college computer lab getting to do some of this stuff. And it also meant that you could take the show on the road a little bit. So if you needed to stop somewhere in between to get a certain shot, I love the story of when Phil Lund was dressed as Grandpa Wigglesworth at McDonald's, pretending he had served in Vietnam and talking to those
he was committed.
Gentlemen. Yeah,
he was committed, and that was great. Yeah, he was getting an ice cream cone at McDonald's in Morehead. That was fun.
I bet it wasn't.
No, I mean, it was. I was always like, as long as people weren't, going to get punched in the face or get arrested, I was generally pretty okay with what happened.
So there were a bunch of things about Greg that we all thought were really cool. And one of them was the fact that he didn't really care about, like, the, how do I put this? He was totally fine with just going your own route and don't worry about following the group too much.
Yeah.
And, if we make it back in time for poster distribution day, great. If we don't, it's not a big deal, But he took us seriously.
Yeah,
you were treated like an adult.
Well, everyone's idea. It was in the marketplace of ideas. Everyone has a shot. Everyone has a shake.
Yeah.
Like if you want to pitch something, I mean, everyone should listen to that pitch. Not everything's going to make it to the show, but that was also kind of a Lorne Michaels sort of thing. about News at Noon was that you would pitch all tons of stuff, and and I would say, well, if you really believe in this, you got to develop it a little bit more. Let's work it till it lands. Because everything was sort of predicated on making sure there was a button to it, and that it just didn't feel like, oh boy, so that's why I feel like you can watch most of it, and again, in the context of its universe, it's not embarrassing, even though it's the most embarrassing years of most of these people's lives.
Yes, it is. It is.
I also I also love the shoestring mentality behind it, in the fact that you didn't have a budget per episode. So if someone wanted something, you needed to figure out a way to get it.
Right.
So for example, I remember when Dustin Buchanan was doing his Indiana Jones parody. It was like, well, what are we going to do, for a boulder? What are we going to do? What I want an idol. Well, how about if you just take the buffalo off of John Marks's desk, and that's, that's your mythic buffalo.
Right.
I remember one day for 3600 Seconds, which was the show in video production 2, which was a play off of the 60 Minutes title, because there are 3600 seconds in 60 minutes. And we had to go to we were going to MSUM, and we ended up parking like a block or two away for some reason. And we walked by, it was like Boulevard time.
It was, cleanup week.
And someone had a bunch of stuff out on their boulevard, and we started digging through it. And
because it's a group of teenage boys and a few girls. Let's just start looking through the garbage.
We got this might have been the all-male season.
It was the all-male season. I stand corrected.
There is a lot to talk about just that season alone. But we found like a softball trophy plaque, and then Pat Funningsland found a wedding dress.
A wedding gown.
And put it on.
Immediately put it on.
And wore it to class, and created a character called the Blushing Bride, who was a supervillain.
And then you found the glasses with the...
No, those belonged to Bryce Richardson.
Oh, those did.
Those
he
were
brought
his.
those
the
in.
disruptor,
the disruptor glasses.
Which were eyeglasses that had egg beaters.
They were spoons.
It was
spoons with holes cut out for the eyes. On like I forget if it was like just a band or what it was. Yeah, and then like egg beaters sticking out
that could kind of flop around.
Yeah.
And then you had Max Westland, who would go to Perkins and smoke for 4 hours and drink coffee. And he stole a set of children's like toys from the wishing well, and that's how Baron von Worldeye was born, because there was glasses that looked like two little globes, and he just broke them.
So you could look through one, and it had like a monocle.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even that, it's no wonder people from Trollwood News at Noon went on to create things that are just a little off. You look at like Toby Jones and like the work he's doing. No wonder he fits in so well in the animation world, because he's been doing stuff like Baron von Worldeye and characters like that for years.
Toby's one of those guys that when you met him as a kid, you're like, this kid's inevitable. Like he
was inevitable.
So creative and so driven. And so focused on being creative that it's no surprise that he's got. Did they win an Emmy, or are they nominated?
He's been nominated for an Emmy on the show, the various shows he's worked on several times.
So regular show.
Yeah, regular show for a long time. Now he's on OKKO. Yeah. And you should have him on this show sometime when he's back, because I met Toby when he was just a kid. I mean, he was in 3rd grade, I think, and he was living in DL at the lake cabin, and he came into MCAT. He had gone to the Detroit Lakes public access, and it wasn't maybe getting enough tutelage. And so someone referred him to me. And so this 3rd grade kid walks in, this 8-year-old kid comes in, and he'd already made videos, and he wanted me to look at them. And I watched him, and then I he wanted to get some. This is what one of my favorite stories about Toby. I have many, but he wanted to be able to learn from our conversation, so he had a tape recorder. He recorded our conversation with me, grown up Greg, and an 8-year-old Toby. Then so that he could like apply that, and then years later at his graduation from high school, he had his graduation party at the Fargo Theater. He played an audio clip of me and him talking when he was 8 years old, because he had just started making his first TV shows, his cable access shows.
That's fantastic.
But he was a big contributor for sure to Trollwood News at Noon and 3600.
Do you remember any particular sketches or characters that it was just impossible to get through because everyone couldn't keep it together. They would just be laughing.
They blend together. I don't know if you can think of one, Tucker, because there were so many days where
I don't know of any that we weren't able to make it because we were laughing, but I know of ones that just sent us up in an uproar. So when
or that would have multiple takes.
Yeah, so
tons of takes.
There was a day, I think it was when we first introduced Nikolai Alexandrovich, and he and I came up with this idea of him doing like a Britney Spears type dance.
He was going to be topless,
but he was going to do sort of a striptease and have red stars on his nipples.
Yeah,
and I remember, so we're shooting this at Moorhead. And
in
it's just Alex on stage, and then Greg was holding like a handy cam, and he was doing all the shooting, and the rest of us were not in the room. We were all in the booth. And watching Greg film this teenage boy do a striptease was so awesome because Greg was moving around going yeah, now kind of looking at the camera and giving him direction.
It's doing a Austin Powers. Yeah, I'm spent, baby. You know.
Yeah. That was pretty great. Anytime Tim Larson was doing something, we all wanted to watch because he was so brilliant. Same with Tanner Dolan.
He did. Yeah, there were some people who were natural performers and they were really, really good at what they did. And Tim came up with the idea of doing that split screen,
which we mentioned in a previous podcast.
There you go. And I was like, that was just great. I mean, that he was able to figure it out, to time it out so he could interact with himself. And he also did the Mario Plumber but Mario.
Yep, that's right.
Where we had an Easter egg type thing, right? Where we go into the bathroom and he's got plumber crack, and then he does it.
It's me.
Right. He does one of those.
I only did video production 1 year.
1 year.
But it was so much fun. And I remember the part of that year that we couldn't get past was because I was corpsing. I could not get past it. And it's when you played my dad.
Yeah.
And we had brought Natalie Deutsch, who wasn't even doing Trollwood, back to be the anchor character she'd been
in it the year before, but she wasn't doing Trollwood that summer.
Right.
But we brought her back. Yep.
She comes back and we were playing boyfriend and girlfriend, and she breaks up with me on air.
Yep.
And then Greg is my dad coming back saying, like, don't worry, guys. I settled him down, gave him a juice box.
Yeah.
I think if we all just are nice to each other.
Right.
And I just the way you did juice box, I just could not get past it. And that's one of my favorite blooper reels because at one point you hear Tony Frost from behind the camera yelling, "Get it together!"
Every kid, I think, wanted to get Greg in a skit at some point or another.
I got asked to be in every skit, and I had to, try to not do that as much as I could.
You had a couple characters too.
There were times I would be willing to appear on camera in certain contexts.
So we created a character for you, Nigel, who was a promoter.
He was a boy band, like a boy band.
He was promoting it because we were doing. What was the band? We were the actual band. It was an all male.
It was great because you sang Ween, didn't you?
S Club
7.
It was S Club 7. So there were 7 of us guys, and then Nigel, and then basically we combined S Club 7 with Fight Club. And basically what it was
that was the sketch.
And he kept kicking us out of the band because we were violating rules in that conversation. And each time we would lose a member, it would be called S Club 6 and then S Club 5.
That was the joke. Right.
And finally it was just Nigel and Pat Funningsland at the very
S
end.
Club 1. Yeah. Yeah, Pat and Bryce contributed a lot of original musical compositions, and some of those are great. And I know after Pat died, a few people were trying to find and post some of the clips of the numbers that he'd done, and they're great. And it's something we still want to do is kind of remaster and archive the whole set, like everything, and get it available and online so people can see it.
When you think about Trollwood News at Noon and 3600 Seconds, and you think of the people who were there at the time making these things and doing what they thought was awesome, and today maybe they think it is doubly awesome, or they think like, oh gosh, why did I get so deep into that? Do you think that there is a second life to this somewhere? Do you think some of these people are ever going to reunite and try and create like a reunion show years down the road?
Man, a reunion show would be a lot of fun. It would be something I would do if the people were all together in one place at one time. Because now a lot of people have moved away. A lot of the core members from across those years, and there were, to be sure, there were a lot of kids who were kind of like 1 year and out, and you just did the 1 year, and there were others who just they maybe it wasn't their thing, like Tucker. It was Tucker's thing to be there, and Luke Italiano, wanted to kind of keep it going, and there were a lot of people like that too. So I think there's some. It would be interesting to hear from those people who it wasn't something they were desperately into, and find out what they think about it. Today, because I don't even know what has happened to some of them. I mean, we've lost a lot of the people who are involved in News at Noon. I mean, there have been like 4 or 5 kids who are gone. Who didn't survive into adulthood, and that's just a heartbreaker for me, because every time I thought, what is it about these individuals who have something creative in their heart or their soul, and they're like fragile in some way. Yeah. So that weighs on me when I look back. And I haven't watched the stuff for a long time because the fact that it exists on mini DV tape, the masters on mini DV and then SVHS, we haven't transferred them over to digitize them. A few we have, and there's a few things that have escaped out online, but most of that archive is just kind of sitting in a box. And you mentioned, bloopers and outtakes. There's raw footage tapes too that some people would be like, some people would cringe to see themselves at the age of 14 or 15. And other people would be like, this is amazing. Because we haven't mentioned yet that one of the components of the show was to do the question of the week. Because the method for question of the week was the reason to do it was to get people interested in watching, because it was a trick. You could have all the kids who were there who weren't in the video production class. You go and interview them, and then they're going to want to watch, hoping that their clever answer was cut into the montage of question of the week.
And sometimes we would reuse the same answer from a person over and over again as a callback.
You'd pick the funniest one and then just make it a callback.
So there was who said Chewbacca.
That was the first time. The first one we ever did was Chewbacca. It was a girl. She was working in costumes. I think we went into the costume building, and we were asking about, a favorite Star Wars character. I mean, they started off really basic like that, and she was exuberant in her answer, and then we just ended up using that answer then for each subsequent week for the rest of that season. And then that became a thing where you'd pick swim with the dolphins, I think was one. A few years later.
One of my favorite ones was you interviewed Reed Strand with, if you could change your name to anything, what would it be? And he goes, something like RR, like JJ. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching that and looking over and being like, I did not hear him say that when we were recording this. That takes me by surprise. Mm-hmm. And then you had moments where someone would grab the mic out of the interviewer's hand to showboat a little bit. I think Mike Allen was guilty of that several times. But that's kind of the fun of it, right? Everyone out there is showboating a little bit. Everyone wants that little moment.
There's a little bit of competition to try to see if you could do something that would get you on camera. And
did you ever have anything where they just flat out said no? Like where you said, listen, would it be all right if we opened a fire hydrant today?
We did ask for things that were outside the boundaries of what the regular rules in the daily announcements were. So no one was allowed to drive the gator. No one could drive the golf carts around. And I was like, so every year someone in class would say, could we figure out a way to drive the golf carts around? So we'd always do it. And we ended up doing like a Fast and the Furious parody with the golf carts that Dustin Buchanan was hilarious in that because he was playing the Robert Duvall character. And then we did, and we used the golf carts in several other instances too.
I want to say too, might have been Seth Harju or Tanner Dolan who grabbed one of those international flags. Mm-hmm. That we needed an international flag, and
so went ahead and helped himself.
And I remember it was so funny because there was a group of international students nearby, and then Seth, I think it was Seth, ran up to this. We had probably 10 or 12 flags and sort of in a row, and just grabbed one and just took off with it, and we ended up using it in a skit. And they would just let you do that.
Or like the bookmobile gets brought into stuff because the bookmobile just happens to be in the parking lot at Trollwood Park.
Well, we would, you like you said earlier, the shoestring nature was use what was available to use. And then we would, sometimes if we were off campus, we would get permission to shoot places. And that got to be more and more. The closer it got to the end of my years doing it, we went and shot at a laundromat one day in a sketch that Scott Ecker played Ironing Man in. It was an Iron Man parody. And so we did a whole thing with Tony Starch, I should say, in a laundromat where there's and it was they were like, because we you roll up in the van, one of the kids goes in or I go in and say, hey, would it be okay? We're from a this summer class program. Could we come in and shoot for a little bit? So we got permission most of the time. Not all the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Well, even like the MCOM Center, I know.
Yeah, that was fun.
Like how many years were you out there as like an assistant?
2, I think.
Only 2, huh?
I think 2.
Uh-huh.
I think it was only 2.
Okay.
I'm not positive.
Because I remember you wearing the Viking. I don't remember why I was there that day, but you're wearing the Viking helmet, and
Heidi
you were.
Gustad had a character who I can't remember. Oh, it was her and either Steve or Toby were doing something at the MCOMs, but I don't remember what it was. Mm-hmm. It's hard to recall everything from that time.
Since you mentioned Steve Maloney, I remember when his fancy basalt knife was shattered. He had this beautiful, he owned this beautiful, like hand-carved, like obsidian style knife that was carved out of basalt. And they were doing a sketch in, I don't know if he was playing his Wallaby Schmuck character, was a private investigator, but in the sketch, someone dropped the knife and it shattered on the picnic table. And he stayed in character and had to keep rolling, even though he just lost this artifact, his personal artifact. And that happened a number of times. Most notoriously when Alex Davey had to go to the emergency room because he was playing a character pawing.
We show up. It's the end of the day. Like it's the last.
Yeah.
Like we have just come back to the park because we're all about to leave for the day. I'm holding the camera in my hand, and Alex is with us, and Greg is with us, and someone had like chucked like a big CRT TV. In the parking lot, and it was open, and the guts were open, and it was just
like a 24-inch TV just shattered on the ground.
And as a joke, I said, "Hey, Alex, pretend like you're eating the inside of the TV,"
because there were all these wires and innards sticking out. It looked really great. It was a great shot.
I started recording, thinking he's gonna, be safe and pretend to do it, but he just takes his hands and just starts digging in as hard as he can,
just hunkering down, like he's honestly like shoveling this stuff, pretending to eat it in his mouth. And about 2 seconds later, he's like, and the camera's rolling. He's like, "Oh, I cut myself," and it was like a Julia Child gusher, on SNL, and you can hear me on the camera go, oh no, oh no, and I realized like the Band-Aid wasn't going to do it. Like we were going to
get stitches.
Yeah, get stitches for that, and Alex was a magnet for disaster. Because he had loaned me one year his copy of do you remember this? From Hell, the graphic novel. And I read it, and I took great care of it. And then as I'm handing it back to him in the parking lot, it slips out of our hands and lands flat in a big mud puddle. And we both kind of looked down for a second, looked at each other, and I was like, well, I'll get you a new copy of that. So I'll keep the waterlogged one.
One thing that sticks to me from my year there, and maybe Tucker, you can identify with this, but if you had a character who had a costume that'd be a reoccurring costume, it's not like they gave you space there to store it. You had to keep it in the trunk of your car, and it never really got washed because we were all high school students. Mm-hmm. I remember Colin Frober and I played 2 characters called the Dudes, who are these like hapless nerds.
Oh, yeah.
I was wearing a shirt with Ralph Wiggum on it, and by the end of the season, the neck is so blown out on it, and you could tell it could pretty much stand up on its own.
The Dudes characters were great, and Colin. We haven't mentioned Colin yet, but he played a character called PBJ Wonder, who was
I love PBJ Wonder.
Just a tremendous character.
Great costume too.
He had a sort of a camel colored sport coat, and then two colors of that looked just like grape jelly, like of purple and
for
violet,
scarves.
like scarves. So it looked just like a peanut butter sandwich. And in that character, there was just a lot to it. I thought a lot of life in that character. And that character recurred for several years.
Oh yeah.
One of my all-time favorites is Jenny Sheets as Soccer Mom.
Oh, Soccer Mom.
I thought she just nailed. I mean, she's playing her mom. Mm-hmm. She's playing Paula the whole time, and anyone who knew Paula thought, "Oh my gosh, Jenny is nailing it. This is perfect."
One of my favorite skits we ever did. So we were talking earlier about how you were saying, with these shows, there's a ton of inside jokes. You know, we were kind of making it for ourselves and the people who were at Trollwood. And sometimes we would make things for just ourselves and not even the people at Trollwood. Mm-hmm. And there was a skit we came up with called Kvik Lunch. Mm-hmm. And it was that June, the Scandinavian Festival was going on, and Greg's assistant was Tim Jorgensen, who we've had on the podcast before. Mm-hmm. And who is fluent in Norwegian and is very steeped in Scandinavian culture. And he had brought us a chocolate bar called Kvik Lunch from there, and we decided to make a skit based on that.
Yeah, like a commercial.
Like a commercial for it, but we wrote a dialogue in English and then had him translate it into, I think it was Norwegian.
Yeah.
And we would do our best to then pronounce the Norwegian that he wrote for us. And we didn't subtitle it, so that the audience had no idea what we were saying. And it was something like, I'm sitting with the chocolate bar, Alex sits down, we say hello, and I say, he says, I have a wound, and I say, genitals, and then I hand him the Kvik Lunch bar. He opens it, and now there are sardines on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He takes a bite of it and says, this is not clean. And then I say, how misfortunate.
Yeah.
And
did he get subtitled?
No subtitles.
Oh,
I think just saying genitals was a thing that was really funny when you're a teenage kid that you could get away with. We put that in a lot of sketches.
It might still be
reference
funny
to genitals.
today.
Yeah,
say the word genitals. The word genitals themselves is just a funny word.
Yeah, it is.
It sounds like the name of a neighbor, the Genitals.
The only thing funnier than saying genitals is genitalia.
Genitalia. It was the first reference to genitals on the show was in the very first season when, and you referred to it earlier, but it was when Sean Thorson was playing a little old lady character, and he made up a phony answer for question of the week when it was a Mr. Clean versus Aunt Jemima. Who would you take?
Yeah.
Who would you back in a fight?
Yeah.
And he said he chose Aunt Jemima because Mr. Clean's lower anatomy leaves his genitals exposed for attack, and I think because he thought of the tornado, the tornadic spinning action.
He's kind of a genie character.
Yeah, right, Mr. Clean.
I think of, and I don't know why I was there for this, but I remember Ben Hansen really having an axe to grind against George W. Bush.
Yeah, he did. He was politically motivated from an early age.
And then look at him now, right?
Yeah.
He's a major player in North Dakota state politics.
Yeah, he's served in the State House of Representatives.
He's the political assassin.
He was Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 9/11 had come out, and so Ben was inspired by a lot of the Michael Moore poking fun at Bush's at the time, apparent cluelessness, because there was the famous clip when he tees off, he says, "Now watch this drive," after he's
saying like we will stop their reign of terror. Now watch this drive.
And
I
so
remember Ben trying to really nail this, and I approve this message.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did that, and Ben had another funny skit that year where it was a mashup of The Hobbit and Eminem's 8 Mile, and he was on the bus and he was doing the Eminem song.
Yep.
But in he'd rewritten the words to conform to some,
because it was a version of Frodo Baggins was the name of the character.
Yeah.
But I can't remember what it was.
Right.
Early Mitch. So another thing though that kind of leads into is a lot of the types of skits we would do would be movie trailer parodies.
Yeah.
And that
every year.
That was a big thing, was that once movie trailers were going online, and we were all seeing them online for the first time.
You could watch the Clumps trailer 40 or 50 times.
Exactly, like the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring trailer when that hit, that was big. And so we would do parody trailers, and Bryce Richardson had a moped called the Honda Hobbit. And so we did a trailer called Lord of the Moped, which was a lot of fun.
I also, in my mind, the most cinematic thing that I ever saw through 3600 seconds that I still can remember, like I can remember Alex Davey in it too today, is Jet Jet. And that had some really amazing shots, and it was taken so seriously,
right?
That is probably why it was so entertaining and
that
endearing.
Was more or less, wasn't that like a parody of 1950s and 60s Godzilla kaiju movies and things like that? And it was cut that way, cut to look that way.
There's a great shot where somebody in the foreground is blurry, but it's two like mission control people, and you see Alex Davey like turn, and you see his eyes are super wide, and they're in front of. Do you remember where that equipment was?
That was in.
That was MCAT.
Was that at MCAT?
No. That was Moorhead. That was Moorhead.
Minnesota State Moorhead in the basement. When Weld Hall used to have a television production studio down there, so we could do chroma key stuff, and you could do some kind of primitive studio effects.
Yeah, all the desk stuff was there too. Like everything.
The desk existed in a few different locations. So it started. The very first few years was at MSU, but we did the desk also. In a different building at MSU when we were up in the big round room where the villain group was together.
Legion of Evil.
And then
Union of Evil.
The Union of Evil. We eventually had the desk at Concordia as well. We were over there. And then we had the desk at in the high school. When MCAT moved into the high school.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that these video production classes were also a lesson in music appreciation. Because music played a big part. It was during the opening credits, closing credits, adding it into pieces. And thank God, Greg, you had such an eclectic taste, because I was introduced to so much music I had never heard before. I remember like the Snatch soundtrack was really heavily used my year because everyone was really into that.
That's what they were pitching, huh? Because I sort of let people. It got to be the kind of thing where people would also vie to have their song, a song they were really into, and to me, it had to kind of pass a certain threshold to be cool enough to make it, especially if it was going to be opening or closing credits music. Because sometimes it would be themed. It would go along with something that was in that episode, and other times it was just my own interest in having a large record collection. And so there were every year it seemed like there would be Prince songs would be in there somewhere. We'd have like a good and not the like deeper cuts, it would be deeper cuts but still really good. The best use of music for me in a sketch was when we did a Darth Vader sketch with Alex Davey, and we used Bill Withers' "Lovely Day." And it's like sort of Darth Vader.
It was Vader's roommate.
And like how Vader has to deal with domesticity. He's got to mow the lawn and hang the laundry up to dry and stuff like that. And Alex, as usual, was completely selling it, like stretching, getting up in the morning with the helmet on, and he's in his like boxer shorts and nothing else with the Darth Vader helmet, and he's like stretching out.
And I played his roommate who was perpetually annoyed by by Vader being there. And I would read The Source magazine.
Yeah, you're reading The Source. I had a subscription to The Source at the time. And we because we were shooting that year, I had recently moved into my home. And so we were using the home as because we'd stop to get things. People would say we need a Darth Vader helmet. Where are we going to get one? If there was stuff that I had lying around.
Yeah, the Carlson household is in a lot of skits.
It was in a ton of stuff.
And also a good amount of student films
and tons of student films. Maybe best used in Aaron Baker's movie. What was the name of that one? After School Special. Aaron Baker made a movie called After School Special, and it was just fantastic. And some of it was shot at my house.
I remember a girl named Christina Rios and I sitting by ourselves at midnight during the Fargo Film Festival, and we were the only people there for the student selection.
Yeah.
It was great because Christina was very attractive and I wanted her attention very badly, so we got to have a friendship because of it.
Yeah, sure.
But I remember watching one that was shot, and maybe did we talk about this on the last podcast?
I don't know.
it was like a house party,
Yeah,
and it was
I know
some
the
guy
one.
who was working through his own
Yeah.
love of a girl who he must have cast in this. I mean, that's you're watching it and you're like, oh, so he's
Oh, it's
really in love with
fantastic.
her in real life.
That's the great Scott Stangrum, who still lives in town. Shout out to my friend Scott Stangrum. And I'm trying to remember the name of the film now is on the tip of my tongue, but Shannon Jacobson plays the girl that he has. So yeah, it's an unrequited crush. So they're friends, and he wants to be more than friends. And all hell breaks loose during a house party. And Brady Daly was in it. And there's a scene in the movie where a character breaks the toilet, like ends up smashing the back of the porcelain lid. And like, I don't know if they fell onto the toilet or what, but they had to figure out a way to do this without actually breaking the toilet. And in another scene, Brady Daly's character, he shrimps a girl who's passed out. He takes her sock off, and then it's implied that he is going to lick her feet without her consent. You know, he's gonna assault her. And I remember the way that they set that shot up. It was just this, you know, the flourish of taking the sock off and exposing the foot, and then he's like gonna go in for the sandwich. You know,
and he was the best friend character.
He was the best friend character.
He had my favorite. Like, I remember watching that like it was yesterday, and he has the last line of that, which is after the love, he puts his heart on the line. It gets dashed to the side. He goes and he grabs his best friend who's passed out on a couch, and he goes, "Come on, let's go." And he's like, "Let's go get a big fucking plate of bacon," and that's how it ends.
Right.
It was great.
Yep. Yeah. That is. I will have to look that up to tell you the title of that movie.
When it boils down to it, I think Trollwood News at Noon in 3,600 seconds, video production out of Trollwood, it definitely launched a bunch of careers, right? A bunch of people got their opportunity to learn what it's like to work creatively as a team, which is a big thing. So if you're writing something with somebody else, you had to give up control and you had to come back. You had
Definitely.
to have faith in it. I remember all of us thinking Eric Ramsmo was just nuts with his Dr. Tinkle character, and it became one of my favorites.
Dr. Tinkle's awesome.
Yeah,
a lot of doctor characters.
Right. Ramsmo was not a natural born performer, so that part was harder for him, was to do the on-camera stuff, because he was not entirely confident in his abilities. But I would always say, just try it. Just try a little thing. But he was, you could tell he was someone who was really committed to visual storytelling. He wanted to be part of it, and he kept coming back as well.
He and Tony Frost did the like Crocodile Hunter parody characters where he was his wife and
suck out the poison. That was a great bit.
There's just so many great things. And do you ever have people who ask you to put it online? Do you ever have people who request the masters?
I'm sure, and I've had a few who've requested to keep it away from being posted online for all to see. But I would love to. I have all of it mostly in one place, because there was the first couple years were SVHS, and then after that it was mini DV, and then it kind of just stayed mini DV until near the very end. And so we went from making dupes. Everyone at the end of the season could bring, or I would just give them a free VHS tape, because we just used the old tape stock archive at MCAT.
Yep.
And I would just make dubs so that we just bring them after Sun Celebration or whatever, and then everyone would have a copy. Then eventually we burned DVDs for people. So there's a ton of, every year, complete sets of the show got out into the world. It was just before uploading to YouTube was a standard common thing to do. And so a lot of people have, just possessed and retained these things. And so that's how I'm sure some of the things ended up online that way.
I've got one down in my basement.
Because I have a few tapes of my time, not everything, but a few things. And I think I digitized one or two of my tapes, but they wouldn't have been masters. They wouldn't have been source tapes. So at some point, Greg and we've talked about a lot, because I've got a full tech setup for, especially with VHS tapes at least, doing a really, really nice capture of those, digitize of those. So at some point we got to get together and figure out how to execute that and get that done. So at the very least, even though they're not necessarily maybe not going to be online, but they'll be preserved. Those
Why
VHS
not create
tapes,
an event? Why not create like a like a reunion.
Yeah.
You could do like a Paley Center type thing where you can get a panel put together as part of it.
They do the annual Trollwood reunion, the all school reunion, and some year, if it was the right time and we had everything, you could see who might be around.
It'd be fun to maybe put together like a best of and go through that best of every season.
Yeah.
My best summer memories are taking Greg's video production class. That was the only thing I wanted to do. If I could have done that all summer long for 3 months.
Yeah, if it was more than just like the 1 month.
I would have done it in a heartbeat. And I didn't want to do anything else. It was just so much fun. And it definitely showed me how fun it was to collaborate with like-minded people. I made a lot of my lifelong friends doing that show. One thing for me, when I think back to my time there, was that I was, even though I was really interested, I was definitely a late bloomer as a writer and a actor, but I was super committed to it.
Yeah.
You know? Like I didn't come to it with a ton of raw creativity, but I definitely knew I liked doing it. But I look back on we did a recurring skit in 3600 seconds where it was Trollwood News at Noon through Time. And the first one,
you were like a caveman, right?
I was a caveman, and we didn't have a costume for me, so I just went shirtless.
Yeah, did you wear a tie though?
No, just shirtless.
Just completely shirtless.
Completely shirtless.
Couldn't remember if you actually had just like a tie on.
No, I had nothing.
Who was
on.
your co-host at
Carly.
that time?
Yeah, Carly.
Yeah, Carly was, and
because she actually had like a caveman.
She had a leopard print.
Shirt,
it was
right?
her skit, I believe. I believe she's the one
She
who
might
came
have-
up with
yeah,
it.
she
So
might
she
have
had
pitched
prepared
that.
for it, and I didn't. I must have assumed they were bringing me something. Anyway, so I went shirtless for the first one, and then it was Greg's idea to just have me be shirtless for everyone after that. So then it was the 70s, and I'm wearing a fro and sunglasses with
but
no
still
shirt.
Yeah, shirtless.
And then it was the future, and I was like a robot who had sunglasses on but no shirt.
It was stuff like that. Yeah, the absurdity of in-universe jokes made it fun for everybody, including me. You know, that there would be certain things that just didn't make any sense, but didn't have to, because it was just, we didn't care. You know, it was just we were kind of making it for ourselves. I mean, the one I wanted to try to make sure that nobody ever felt coerced into doing something they didn't want to do. And so I remember one time we were doing zombies were, even then, you know, a very popular recurring kind of thematic element. And there was a zombie attack thing, and the line is written, whoever wrote the sketch had the recognition of a character seeing the zombies coming say, oh my God, you know. And Kelly Oss was going to deliver the line. And we were shooting, you know, just like you would on a regular shoot, you know, you're blocking things out and you're figuring out your master shot and how it's going to cut together. It's going to fit together. And she said, I can't, you know, I'm not comfortable saying, and I didn't know what she meant at first. And so I said, what's the matter? And she said, I won't, you know, I can't say this. And then I looked at I'm looking at the pages, and I was like, then it dawned on me. It took me a second. I was like, oh, okay. Could you say, what would you propose as an alternative? And I think she agreed to say, oh my gosh, that was okay to do. But it was just like, in the moment, I remember it being like one of those little reminders where the hair kind of goes up on the back of my neck going, yeah, I got to remember that there's a wide range of backgrounds of individuals. And Kelly was great. She was game.
Kelly was awesome.
She did a ton of great sketches with Justin Schultz. She did her Swiss Miss character.
That's right.
She had her pigtails like the girl on the Swiss Miss chocolate milk carton. And she and a character that Justin played were like kind of star-crossed lovers. And
how often did you have to tell a student, like, nope, we're not doing that?
A lot. Yeah, I mean, often enough. Because during the writing, because you remember how we kind of did the writing. You would sometimes do small group stuff, or you just have we do a big group pitch session where we just write down a whole bunch of things, and then we would kind of narrow it down from there. Because there would definitely be people who wanted to always go dark. You know, they would always go to the darkest, like a murder-related, serial killer-related sketch was the most frequently pitched thing that we said no to. each year. Someone would say, I want to do a serial killer.
No drug use.
And I would be like,
nothing like that.
And drugs, we had drug references to things, but we didn't have characters using
sort
drugs,
of like an
having a drug
reference
problem.
to something.
Right, because there was the one time when it got outside of our circle, and the school thought they needed to investigate because there was a scene where someone had like a baggie of containing an illicit substance in it. And wasn't Case Dillon involved in that one?
I know Pat Funningsland came up with a skit once where someone was, but it was bugles.
Yeah,
the illegal bugles were being
or maybe that was after the fact that we ran with it because someone had claimed some student had gone and tattled and said that the kids in video production were drugging, and so I got called before Vicky or something, and I had to say, no, I can assure you that nobody is like during class, that nobody's taking drugs. And then we ended up, it sort of got built then right into the sketch where they were selling bugles.
We should also give a shout out to Tom Syme, who never said no, at least when I was there. Even when it was like, hey, we want to do this Indiana Jones reference. And he's like, well, I know who I'm going to play. He's ready to go right at the get-go. I remember the kiss scene between Dustin and Natalie was great, but it also like and maybe you didn't feel it, you probably did, but like it caused like a thing outside of Trollwood.
Right. No, I figured it might.
Because it was like, well, Dustin like waited way too long, and why was he kissing me that way? And I'm not interested. And then Dustin's like, what am I
going to do?
That was the year she had the bloody eye, though.
Yeah.
She had, what happened to,
she had fallen and broke a blood vessel.
And we were...
She like hit it on a table or something, she said.
I don't remember the details.
Yeah, it was at Trollwood. It was like the first day of Trollwood on the picnic table. Oh.
Well, so anyway, like when characters had to kiss, because that would come up from time to time, and my idea was to treat it just like you would if you were a professional show, like on an SNL or whatever, and just say we'll just shoot it and move on. I mean, it doesn't have to be weird for anybody. And again, making sure that all the parties going into it knew what, like it was mapped out ahead of time, so they knew what the shot was going to be. Even if there was like after the fact kind of like, I got strange feelings about that.
That Indiana Jones parody really it covered a lot of ground because Tom got to drive a golf cart.
Yeah, he did
for the No Time for Love. Dr. Jones.
It's a good moment.
You got to use John Marks' office in personal effects.
Yeah. Right.
Dustin got to bring that leather jacket he was so excited about. And then there's a kiss in it too. Although Dustin and I argued for years after this, and we could not find a tape of it. I don't know why we didn't ask you, but he insisted that he used the correct female name when referring to Natalie. And I said, no.
What do you mean?
So he says, oh, Marion, and then he kisses her, and I'm like, but Marion isn't in Temple of Doom.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You're confusing.
It's Willie.
Yeah, you're confusing your Indiana Jones
Willie
leading
Scott.
ladies. And he said no. And he was adamant that he used the right one for years. And I was like, Dustin, I know, because I watched that and I immediately thought, you're better than this.
But
come on, guy.
Or it's possible that in the we just decided that Marion was the best indie counterpart. And so we were just like, maybe it's just maybe it's going to be Marion Ravenwood, because Marion Ravenwood's sort of the one that I like the most. Maybe that's I don't remember. I'd have to look at the sketch
because Marion had that awesome blonde curly hair like Natalie did. Of course, I'm maybe digging in a little too deep.
Willie did. You mean Willie?
Did. No, that's what I'm saying. Is Natalie had blonde curly hair, so she does not look like a Marion.
Exactly.
You'd be better off grabbing somebody else.
Shout out also to John Marks and Vicky Chapoulas for allowing themselves to be the butt of jokes from time to time.
They were such good sports about that.
John was adamant that video was the wave of the future, he brought it into his school year classes. And I remember at one point walking in there, and he had maybe like 15 camera batteries charging at once because he always wanted equipment available to kids if they wanted to use it.
Right. John's vision was that you shouldn't be afraid of any kind of evolutionary technology, that it's just like let people use it, even if he didn't know all the details about how to make it function. He said, just go ahead and have some fun with it. And I like that about them. Along with what you just said, they were game. They knew not to take themselves so seriously, that it was okay to to be used in, we would edit them out of context. So it would make Vicky saying things that she didn't actually say. We would have those fake interviews where the question, her answer was clearly not the answer to the question that had been asked. And she was just, when she watched it, she would laugh and never express to me any kind of reservations about how we were depicting the park or them, and because they kind of understood the spirit of it.
I remember Rob Reese once telling me, he said, what you're doing here is what professional comedians and people who are trying to break into the industry are doing in New York.
Right.
And so, because he was the first person who ever told me about the State. He's like, if you like this kind of stuff, you need to seek out the State.
Yeah.
And thank God he told me about that, because that has gotten me through a lot of long nights.
Yeah. Well, and I had an interest in that stuff and realized kind of the same way. Like it didn't matter whether the final product was incredibly funny or if it fell flat. It was just the process of doing it a certain way, the integrity of doing it a certain way, allowed me to kind of keep coming back, because it was exhausting. Like there was no doubt it was like the Army, the toughest job you'll ever love. For me that June, I would go home after 4 back-to-back periods, and I would just be wiped. I would have to sleep and then just try to gear up for the next day, because it always meant like what props, we'd have lists. Every day I'd come home with pieces of paper in my pockets from the students had written down, this is the stuff we need. You need to find all this stuff. And my grandmother, who was incredible, would be supplying props for us. And I used to take the class over to her house, to my grandmother's house, each year for the first many years the vans, at some point we would stop by, she would know we were coming, and then she'd have, a treat or a snack for everyone. And that was it. We would just stop so I could either pick something up, but I'd introduce the students to my grandmother, and a happy memory for me, I guess, from the class.
Wow.
In addition to just the students, the many students, and there were so many that went unnamed, Dan Hassoun, who was another person I met and have had maintained now a many years close friendship with. And he came in as, like me, really an introvert, a person who's not going to like jump out in front and say, like, everyone pay attention to me. He's going to hang back.
Yep.
But I like, this kid is so smart. Like, I knew that we had a simpatico kind of sense of humor. And so as he was coming up with various characters that he would do, including doctor characters.
What was the doctor's name?
Thurgood Feelgood.
Thurgood Feelgood.
The third. Thurgood Feelgood. Because, Dr. Feelgood, being the kind of the classic drug reference. But Thurgood had a nice, like, a rhyme with it. But there was a sketch where they were eating donuts that had been treated with a chemical that reversed vasectomies. And so Dan deadpans this bit where he's just taken this big bite of donut right when his assistant, like the nurse character, says that it reverses vasectomies, and then he kind of sets the donut down and like moves back. And it was just another one of those. It was like kind of out of context, but it was still so funny to me.
Do you remember how old Dan was when was that, like,
he
his
started
junior
really
year?
young too. He started like he was an early, and stayed with it, as long as he could. And that's how I think it was through, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was through the Trollwood video production classes that Toby and Dan became close friends, and that group of creators kind of ended up going, living in a house together in the Twin Cities.
Yep.
And they're we still see each other several times a year to talk about movies.
Yep.
Boy, I think right now, if I'm listening to this podcast, I was like, I want to watch some of this stuff.
How do you see it? How can I see
They've been
this?
pushing it so much.
Well, once we get kind of our
rears in gear and get some stuff digitized, we can start putting stuff online, and you can definitely look, maybe at the JJ Meets World Facebook page.
We could have at least an example or a sample of something. I'm sure that's already out there.
I have some stuff up that because when Pat passed away, I did digitize some of his stuff, and that is up there. But I'll have to look.
Yeah,
around for more.
I'm so grateful that content with Pat exists.
Yeah.
Because when Pat died, it was just, I remember, we were communicating about it, and it was such a loss. I mean, Pat, was a person as well that I would see regularly. I would bump into him, and we would always have stuff to talk about, music and other things. And so it made me want to go back and see all of the other things that weren't online that Pat had participated in. So maybe
when we were at Jared's memorial service, people were quoting things he said in Trollwood News at Noon, and I thought, that stuck with you that long?
Yeah, you and Jared had several characters that you created that were kind of together. Like there was that gangster, these like gangster characters.
They're doing some racketeering. Yeah. We sold fake Footloose tickets that summer.
That was the year of Footloose. That was a good show. Yeah, I like that.
That's some fun stuff. All right. Well, Greg, if people want to find stuff that you've done, where are they going to find you?
Well, the Trollwood News at Noon stuff is out in the ether right now, but we'll try to make sure that we can get a few things linked on the JJ Meets World.
But you have reviews in the HPR every week.
Right. Yeah. My film reviews are in High Plains Reader and online at hpr1.com, and then my own website, southpawfilmworks.net. So every week I review a movie, and you can read my review of, well, I don't know when this one will air. The most recent thing I reviewed was Unfriended Dark Web, which was not what I would have picked, but that was just what was available. I feel like I'd reviewed all the other things I was interested in.
I was recently chatting with Sally Jacobson, and we were talking about Night of the Sassy.
Yes. One of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. And how many, you've made a bunch of shorts, right, over the years?
Yeah, well, I started, I got a video camera from my parents when I was in high school. It was kind of my pre-graduation gift, or it was my graduation gift, but I got it earlier so I could use it throughout my senior year of high school. And my friend Mike Schultz and I, who you've had on the podcast and is a filmmaker, documentarian, we would shoot a lot of stuff, and we were doing a lot of editing in camera. It was before we had access to editing equipment. So we were thinking cinematically. We were trying to map out how would you make something that felt like a movie rather than just, how you would just shoot a bunch of a long unbroken take. And so we would plan things out to shoot these short 2 to 3 second shots and fit them together. And we did that all through my senior year of high school. And then we were in filmmaking classes with Ted Larson together and shooting on Super 8 and then actually splicing film. So it kind of started that way. But so since the late 80s, early 90s is when I started making stuff. And some of those did get by the time I was working with Sally on Night of the Sassy, that was shot on color. It might have been color negative, and then it was transferred to edit on video. And Night of the Sassy I don't think that one's online.
No,
but it's I think the best copy of that I have is there's a mini DV copy. I have of that one, but yes, I would try to make at least one project a year. So it's added up to a lot of projects over time, and then of course we worked together on the 48-hour film projects, and that moved into the nonfiction ones and beyond. So there's stuff out there.
I bet you've got at least 20 or 30 under your belt.
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah, I mean, it was just something I felt compelled to do. It didn't matter. You always say on to the next one, make the next one better. And so I always admired people who could just get stuff done. And it's hard when you're not working under deadline because as we all know, all creative artists know, the demon on one shoulder is going to be you can work on that later. I mean, I've been working on a short movie with my daughter Violet for months and months, and I need to get it done, but it's just because I don't have a hard deadline. It sort of strings out.
Yeah.
You also, I'm just trying to think. You played my father in one of Tucker's shorts too. You played,
that's right,
General Bumpy in the Baby Bumpy universe.
I make really creative short films. So JJ dressed up like a baby.
I'm gonna have you vomit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Greg's your dad.
Yeah.
He's got a general costume.
He's an army officer, right?
Well, I think originally we established he was an army officer, and then later we established that
He's a cosplayer.
He likes to do reenactments. He likes to do like naval reenactments and things like that.
That's the best thing about the character in universe is that I learned later, that he's not legitimately in the military, that he's just someone who likes the military and has collected a costume. That I appreciate, made me appreciate it all the more.
The unmade third part of that trilogy was supposed to be
the baptism, right?
Hey, it can still happen.
I
it
really
can
want
still
that.
happen.
And what was, because we also talked about doing one with Davy where he was dressed up like Little Lord Fauntleroy.
He was going to be like
my nemesis,
like a rival baby.
It was like Steve Poitras is going to play. He was going to play a naval reenactor and neighbors. So you guys were kind of
they were going to go to a reenactment together, and so he dropped off his son, and then like the kid was going to torment because I think Davy's character was supposed to be like a year or two older.
Yeah.
So like he was more mobile than Baby Bumpy.
And he was going to break something and then blame and be like, it was the baby.
It just, it reminds me a lot of like Roger Rabbit cartoon shorts, those kinds of things.
We'll have to get that up and running.
I agree.
I'm not running for office anytime soon, so it should be easy. All right, Greg, thank you so much for joining us again.
It's always a pleasure.
JJ Meets World.
Well, that does it for this episode. We have a couple of quick asks, listeners. Here's first and foremost, Patreon. It's a place you can donate to the JJ Meets World podcast. We have to pay for studio space. We're paying for equipment. We're paying for the data bytes that are hosting this, making it possible to come to your phone or Alexa or off-brand Alexa that your grandma got you for Christmas that you use just because you're polite and you're too cheap and you miss Prime Day. Patreon.com/JJ Meets World. It's a great way to donate to us. You can choose a couple of different methods. Number one, you can do a reoccurring donation. You can do $2 every month, $24 a year, no sweat. It's kind of like what PBS does, only we're not going to send you a tote bag. We've thought about it, but it's just not going to happen. Number two is you can do a one-time donation, and those are also very, very much appreciated. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do to thank you guys, maybe some exclusive episodes to our Patreon donors solely. You'll find out about that once enough people give to us. Right now, we're just kind of shoving off that idea until we've got enough money to swim in it Scrooge McDuck style. 2, you can subscribe to JJ Meets World. Maybe this is the first episode you've ever listened to. Well, gosh, there are a lot of catalog episodes. You can go to jjmeetsworld.com and check out previous episodes. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and see previous episodes. There's also a lot of great podcast apps out there that'll allow you to fill your phone or listening device with tons of it. If you're still using a Zune, I don't know how you're listening to this on there. It doesn't have the capability. And last, certainly not least, I would like to thank Mr. Tucker Lucas, my producer. He has produced every single episode of JJ Meets World, and I sure would like you to go to his website, www.moonbasemaria.com. You can see some of his previous projects that star little old me and catch up on exactly what he's working on right now outside the podcast world. If you want to get in contact with me, your host with the most, go to linebenders.com. You can find a mailing address for those of you who want to send me, physical mail. You can also find an email address where the bulk of you will actually send me a message. And last, certainly not least, it's time to wrap up this episode with a quick thought for you guys. We talked about cuddling and hugging earlier, but we did not talk about hand-holding. Why is that? Because that's what the devil wants you to do. Hold hands.